I'm Robin Dowling. I'm the Head of School and Dean of Architecture, Design and Planning here at the University of Sydney. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It's on their land that the University of Sydney sits and that we're meeting this evening, and they've been producing knowledge and learning on this land for many, many, many generations before the University of Sydney. And pay my respects to elders past and present. A couple of pieces of housekeeping, because I know I'm seriously not the main event, so I'm going to be very quick. So emergency exits are marked, and there are theatre staff will help us should we need to exit in an emergency manner. I want to welcome to you this talk by our inaugural Gary and Susan Rothwell Chairs in Architectural Design Leadership. Some of you may have met Lacaton and Philippe Vassal, or heard, I'm sure many of you have heard of their work. It's wonderful to see many of you here tonight, and I would love to mention our special guests. So our Rothwell gift donors, Gary and Susan Rothwell, are here. The Chancellor of the University, Belinda Hutchinson AC, is also here. And I should also note that the Provost of the University, Anna Marie Jargosi, is here as well. But there's many planning and architecture professionals. I've actually, Susan and I were sitting outside before, chatting to many of you on the way in. It's fantastic to welcome you back, or to the University of Sydney, to both our students and our alumni. The Sydney School of Architecture, Design and Planning, as many of you know, we've been fostering dialogue about cities and designed environments for over a century. We proudly graduated Australia's first PhD in architecture in 1963 and the first Indigenous architect in 1990. So we have a diverse community of students from and academics around the world. Our research is focused on solving what we like to call real-world problems like for architecture and urbanism, housing affordability. You can't really live in Sydney at the moment without thinking that. And so it's wonderful that in that global context and that housing context that we welcome Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal from French architecture studio Lacaton Vassal, who have been our inaugural Rothwell Co-Chairs and have been working with our students 2.5, going on 3 years. And it's because of our alumni and long-term friends, Gary and Susan Rothwell, the GIFT established the Rothwell Chair, and which is helping the school advance its ethos of socially relevant architecture and design and actually architectural leadership. And so thank you once again to Gary and Susan, and we'll hear have a more formal thank you later. But what the GIFT has really enabled the school to accelerate its ability through our students and through our research to inspire a generation of professionals that will take up the challenges of the day, but also be able to lead our cities and our professions through the next 100 years. The GIFT includes the chair role and support for students and some postdoctoral research associates as well to do research around this, and also practitioners in residence. It allowed us to bring esteemed practitioners across urban design and architecture into the school to work with us and our students. Now, I don't think Anne and Jean-Philippe need much introduction, but I will give you a little introduction because most of you will know how amazing they are. So a fundamental sort of premise of Lacaton and Vassal's work is that urbanism begins with each apartment, with each space that we inhabit, and that quality housing is something that we need to think as an aspiration for everyone. Quality housing is not something confined to the few. They received many, many awards. The most notable and recent is the 2021 Pritzker Architecture Prize, the BDA Grant Prize in 2020, the EU Mies van der Rohe Award in 2019, and the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture in 2018. And from the schools and the university's perspective, it's really it's fascinating for us to acknowledge that Anne and Jean-Philippe are committed and passionate and highly competent and successful educators. They hold teaching positions across Europe and the US, and I won't go into the details there, and they're really valued as they're the ways that they work with students in a generous and inspiring way. So they set up their architectural practice in 1987, and for over 3 decades have been recognised for their boldness in design of new buildings, but also their transformation of existing buildings, which I'm sure we will hear about. Their work covered private, social housing, cultural and academic institutions, public space, but also urban strategies through through perspectives of social justice and sustainability, way before sustainability became a thing that we really wanted to design with. So tonight, Anne and Jean-Philippe are going to present, and there'll be a moderated panel with Kath Lassen and Hannes Fricom, who are going to invite questions and discuss as we go. So please welcome our Rothwell Co-Chairs, Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal.
Thank you very much for your presence. It's nice to come again in Sydney after last year. Thank you for the University of Sydney. Thank you at the School of Architecture. Thank you, Gary and Susan Rothwell, for this professorship that you offer us to do with the students of Australia during these 3 years. And it was really amazing to discover young people thinking from the other side of the world of Paris, and it was very nice. Thank you very much. What will you present is about free space, extra space. Free space was the topic of the Biennale of Venice in 2018, and for us it is important because it talks about freedom in the architecture and the urban planning. What you see on the image, it is our former office, Rue Lafayette in Paris. We were at the last level of this white building, and on top of the roof, the accessible roof, we built with our friend Hans Walter Müller, who is the world's specialist of inflatable volume, this extra space on the roof. And last 3 months ago with the students, we went to visit him in his incredible garden, home, atelier, inflatable volume where he is living since 40 years, and it was absolutely incredible. It's about freedom, and it's about extra space. Free space is space that is not constrained. Space under pilotis, space of balconies and winter gardens, space on accessible roofs, deep inner space which never exists in standard spaces as it is considered too deep or useless. Extra space which makes the programmatic space smoother, more fluid, less expensive. Space free of program, eluding a specific defined function. Space that avoids rules and regulations. Space that isn't asked for, but that we find indispensable. Space that is created additionally, but that doesn't cost more. Or space that costs nothing. Architecture must create freedom and not constraints. Must offer the users the possibility of moving, of appropriating space and situations of interpretation. Generous space invites the user to foster relations, appropriate space, and invent uses, adding capacity for a maximum of freedom of use, multiplying the ground to invent spaces, expanding spaces, creating extra space, free of function, to multiply uses, building as much free space as programmed space with the same budget. Free space is an extra space. It's about building simply, fixing branches in the sand, bending them to create an arch, surrounding them with straw panels that are with a porosity that allows the air to go through, covering it with another kind of straw that will avoid the water to come in the rain season. So it's a straw hut with a little door to go in, a fence around, and in front, outside, 9 branches fixed in the sand, covered by a roof, itself covered by straw. It was the first house that we designed at the limit of the Sahara in Niger before we start our office in Bordeaux. It's about to build with climate, and it is not fighting against. Taking references of professional greenhouses, of this very simple system of ventilation with large openings, leaving the warm air going from above and entering from the ground, using the transparency to create conditions and climatic conditions for different kinds of flowers or vegetables, and to transfer and to adapt that to habitation, to housing, to inhabiting, to create this extra space and this free space. It becomes greenhouses in front of houses. It becomes winter gardens. It becomes these relations between inside and outside that is so important, that makes that every inhabitant has the same feeling to live like in a villa, turning around the different rooms. It means to envelop the flat with a kind of double skin, a skin that is never the same, that is not the same in winter or in summer, not the same in the night or in the day, like a clothes that you have on your shoulders. If it is winter, you make 1 or 2 layers more, or a big coat, and when it is warmer, you take them out. So the flat and the house should work a bit like that, using the ventilation system from one facade to another facade, using this passive bioclimatic system of warming the buffer zone of the winter garden in order to give this warmth to the rest of the apartment and saving some energy, using the rays of the sun in function of their orientation, which is different in winter or in summer. Build double. It was, after coming back to Africa, it was the first house for Mr. and Madame Latapi. The budget was really minimum. It was just enough to have 60 square meters for 60,000 euros in France. And in fact, with them, discussing with them, we went to the project that it is to create 3 times more space for the same budget. 180 square meters for the budget that allows to build a standard house of 60 square meters. The greenhouse on the east is 60 square meters large. It is not heated because it is heated directly by the sun, oriented east to take the first rays of the sun. And in fact, this space that we imagine that it could be a space for tropical plants, immediately it has been used differently by the inhabitants, placing all their furniture, their canapé, their sofa, the tables, the different furnitures. And in fact, this space that we were thinking that it could be used perhaps 50% of the time because of climatic conditions, because it was not heated, it is a space that it is the most inhabited. So it means that the space that does not answer to the regulations, to the norms, to the temperature, to the limits, etc., finally it is the most inhabited space. In the drawings, you will see we will take the color in blue to show this extra space and this free space. In this case of Lacaton House, it was this big greenhouse, 60 square meters, that doubled the space, that in fact is so much important in the life of the inhabitants. The house from the street, open and closed.
So generosity of space is for us an essential condition for living well. So in every project, it's a preliminary condition. We don't imagine doing in a different way. So what we can do in-house, as we showed before, we aim to do it in any condition, and especially in collective social housing. So, but it's also different situations. Housing, collective housing, social housing are really determined by a lot of constraints, a lot of normative. I don't know, something like 4,000 norms are applied to one apartment when you have to build it. It's also very standard surfaces, which are connected with the subsidies, either given by the government, by the city, or if it's private development, by the developer. So all this is constrained in very, very strict limits. But in this case, in Mulhouse, we were asked by a social housing company to work on social collective housing. But the director of this company was very open, because he thought himself that the housing was too constrained, and he wanted to make an experience of is it possible to do something else, and in which condition. So we were 5 architects working on this project, and we were asked to explore each architect with his background, in his way, but to explore this situation with the only condition that we should respect the budget, because it was corresponding to the public subsidies. So we started this project with the same idea of increasing largely the space, because for us, 2 bedrooms of 60 square meters, which is basically a kind of standard, 65 square meters, seems to us too small to have a nice life, to be quiet in the family, to have freedom of being together, but also having the possibility to be separated. So here we wanted to apply the same idea, like in the house La Tapie, doubling the space, making as much extra space as program space. So that was a discussion with the owner, so he agreed that we could do that, and this is the plan of the project. It's a kind of, it starts with the idea of big loft with winter gardens, and that after we have divided in 14 apartments, with all of them have a space on ground floor and a space on the first floor to benefit the conditions, the same conditions, same qualities. So we had, the 5 architects had the same kind of plot. So this is our proposal. And to do this, to double the space, but in the same budget, it requires to think very carefully the relation between cost and construction. And in fact, it's important to anticipate this at the very beginning. And finally, the house La Tapie was for us an amazing lesson, because we had to explore all these conditions to build double, but to build at the same budget. So for this project, we used a basic concrete platform, just columns and a large slab. And on top, we built 3 rows of greenhouses, just the one that you could see before, with all the tools to create and to manage the climate inside, winter and summer, by ventilation, by curtains for shading, but also in introducing a second box inside for the winter time. So, and this produces this project of 14 dwellings. And what is interesting is, of course, immediately the question arrived, but if you built larger, the rent would be bigger, because the rent is, in practice, fixed according to the surface. But it's a discussion that we have very fast with the owner, and we say we cannot expect to change anything if this kind of rules are not discussed. So finally, he agreed to discuss or to check this point, and we all arrived to the conclusion that in France, I don't know in other countries, but in France it's not a law, it's just a practice that has become a law. So it was easy for him to try to define other conditions, and we agreed on the fact that if we succeed to build twice bigger for the same cost, he engaged to keep the rent of the typology and not to increase the rent because the apartment was much bigger. So here for apartment of 1,065 square meters, including the winter garden, while the standard, the requested standard was 100 square meters. The construction cost was 90,000, but in 2005. But the rent was the same as 4 bedrooms of 100,000. So just a few pictures of this construction. The greenhouses that makes this extra space in front of the large living rooms. And a long time later, these pictures have been taken 2 years ago, how it's lived today and how the extra space creates a very good and unexpected conditions of life for the inhabitant. So this project you can see in the exhibition. There is a film, and you can see what the guy is, how he talks about the space, and it's really interesting to see it. So it's interesting also to show to think through these projects that in a way the standard makes no sense, because there is no standard families, there are no standard people. So enlarging the typology, enlarging the quality of space is very important. So building double was also our aim in the project of a school of architecture in the city of Nantes. A school of architecture, double space and program space to invent uses. So the brief for the School of Architecture for a number of 1,000 students was scheduled 9,000 square meters for usable surface. But it's very clear when you read the brief that you see that it's finally the compromise between the needs, the expectations, but also the budget, and the kind of standard of educational spaces. And you see in reading the brief that in a way there is nothing in between the spaces, nothing where there is a chance to do something else, to appropriate the space in another way. So the school is, the design of the school is based on the very large infrastructure of very robust concrete floors that we call ground, because they have the capacity much bigger than a floor. So 3 floors, the first one at 9 to 10 meters high, and the 2 others 6 and 6 meter high. And every floor could support a load of 1,000 kilo per square meters, which allowed to do a lot of things, but also to rebuild mezzanine without having to reinforce anytime the structure. And the roof itself is also similar, because the roof becomes a kind of square, a plaza on the top of the school. So starting from this structure, which can become a school of architecture, that's the first program, but also could be reused in 20, 30 years by something else. So it's also interesting to think structures in this way. Open structures, a lot of lights surrounding the large facade to bring the light inside. And again, this big structure allowed to rather double the surface needed for the program. It means that every space could have, every program space could have the equivalent as extra space. So here you see the different levels. Again, in blue, it's the extra space. And in white corresponds to the brief and the program space, libraries, classrooms, auditorium, atelier, and so on. And to create this, the program, we redivided the spaces by light construction, mezzanine, that you can see here in red. And the program, the brief, is installed in these spaces, redivided, or some others stay with double height. And here you can see sections where you see the difference. The green is program space, and the blue is extra space, which has also, like a winter garden, different climatic conditions in between, inside, outside, which is also another way to consider the energy saving. So some pictures of the School of Architecture built, now it's 10 years ago, with a lot of facilities to, like here, it's a large atelier of 1,000 square meters with 9 meters high, connected to the street with large windows, so they can enter materials, they can do easily a lot of things. So they can build inside, they can prepare large structure, but also it's a space where they can do shows, they can do parties, they can do catwalks for the fashion week. So it's a kind of unlimited possibility of use. The big auditorium of almost 300 seats, which is not only for the courses, but also equipped to receive also some shows, some events, with this large door that opens to the river and to the square in front. So they can also rent or lend the space for theater. The school has a department of scenography, so they also welcome residents, scenographers, artists, that find here also the possibility of developing scenographies. There are also dancers, and in the first year, the students are welcome with 1 month or 2 months of dancing to explore the school before they start any of the teaching. And this extra space, which basically is free of function, but it's led to the users to decide what they will do with it. Here it's connected with the library, but it can be basically a meeting place. But it can be also full of some other activities, a balcony on the city. So it's a free space that must be negotiated between the users, how to be used, when to be used. And the condition is that when it has been used, it should return to the point where it becomes again a free space open for the next to be used. Here it's an atelier with exploration of the map of the city. And also the school is it's kind of infrastructure in between, inside, outside, where also the city enters. We can see that the extra space is also as far as you see, and not just space limited by the facade. So it can welcome, host all these activities, workshops, atelier of building models, but also some competitions of squash or badminton. And the ramp, which is, because I forgot to say that all these levels of the infrastructure are linked, of course, by stair and elevators inside, but also outside the building by a very large ramp with a very slow slope that is very good for pedestrians, for bikes, but also that allows to bring material occasionally by tracks that can come here. But it creates also this kind of outdoor space very specific that the students have appropriated and created uses. So the ramp is also like a street, a way to reach the spaces, but also it's a place for some events like students' race, or sometimes bikers, or it's open also to the public on the weekend. And the roof of the school is a large plaza at 24 meters above ground with a fantastic view on the city where a lot of things happened. Like, for example, this summer outdoor cinema. And all of this is also managed by the students. For example, the organization of this air cinema has been made by students. The construction of the screen, the calculation of the screen, all of this is also part of the education. Built with the existing, it's also something that is very important for us, to take care of what we have already, and not always to think starting from an empty place. So all situations of projects have are and existing, propose something that already is there. This was here a project for a small holiday house on the seaside in the southwest of France, on the Arcachon Bay. So, and on the plot, we were facing this wonderful landscape, wonderful view, and the house should be built in the forest. And for us, the most important question was we should take care that after should not be worse than before. So in words, it means not to destroy the quality of the place with all these 50 pine trees that were existing on the site. We could observe that on generally, before constructing, there is a clearing which is made with some trees cut, and the house is made in this clearing. But in this case, we propose not to cut any trees and to try to build the house with little elements, taking care of the trees. The soil is also very fragile. It's a dune, so we worked with long columns on the ground, with no connections on the ground, but all the connections were in the upper structure, with this steel structure made of small elements that could be brought by two men and with no tracks on the side. So the house is elevated to keep the ground free and the ground natural. And it tried to not to avoid the tree because the plan is rather regular, but to try to deal with all the trees. And here we can say that the extra space is not the house. It's a view, is what we have in front, which is the horizon, which is the sea, that totally enter the house, and the ground floor also, which is totally free. So the house is elevated. Trees are inside, wherever they are, in the corridor, in between the bathroom and the bedroom, but also in the living room, which creates this view of nature and architecture totally merged, without any domination of architecture and the nature. And what is also interesting in this case is that the value of the plot is so high here that compared to it, the cost of architecture is rather nothing. So built with the existing, and it's also a very important topic on which we work since many, many years. It's about doing with the housing blocks, and especially the social housing blocks, which has been built in large quantity in all cities or all suburbs during the 60s and 70s. So we are especially involved in working in this topic to transform, reuse, upgrade, to extend life, to reinvent, to do more with less. And why we have been so much involved in this situation? Of course, because it's something already there, and we are interested in trying to do things with what we have. But also it's because in France, since 24 years, there was a national program of urban renovation based on the demolition of 200,000 housing units that should be rebuilt one to one. And the cost of this was absolutely amazing, evaluated to 165,000 euros per dwelling to demolish and rebuild. And at this time, in the early 2000s, with Jean-Philippe, but also with a friend, Frédéric Druot, we were really committed to work on that situation because we didn't really understand why buildings of 40 years, 50 years should be already demolished while they are solid, they are rather solid, and what was the reason and the argument, and we were involved in trying to propose alternative or other solution like no demolition, transformation, and we did a number of case studies to show that it was possible and to compare situations. So all of this was published in this book that we name Plus. Plus because it's you can do plus with what you have, but plus is also about generosity. And working on different examples, as you can see here, we calculated very precisely the cost of transformation to arrive to the conclusion that important transformation that bring these buildings in a new cycle of life, but in good condition, not just a minimum of renovation for another cycle of life of 40 years. For the cost of an average of 55,000 euro per dwellings, it was before COVID, today probably it's a little more, but just probably that the comparison remains similar. So it means that for the cost of one demolition and rebuild, we could renovate or transform in the best way 3 to 4 existing apartments. So the operation could be simple because at the 60s, 70s, in many times, the construction were made very fast because it was the goal was to build massively on a short time. So in some places, the quality of housing was not the main purpose, and we find a lot of situations like this with towers or big slabs with very little windows, no connection with outside. And we thought that if very simply we could open the facade to bring light, to bring air, but also to bring an outdoor space that would radically change the situation. And from inside, starting from little windows, instead of just isolating and reducing the windows, as probably the norm would lead to do it today, the norm of thermal norms, we think it's better to open, to create an outdoor space, and that changes the situation. But also renovate the ground floors, reintroduce the keepers, introduce some activities like working spaces in the first levels, which are not the best for housing, introduce community space, children space, a sauna, or a lot of communal services that could be done at the place, or a meeting room, or a place for cooking, and so on and so on. So just an example to illustrate this research that we did. It's this project of 3 housing blocks in the city of Bordeaux, 530 dwellings, and we were involved in the competition for the renovation. And again, it's social housing. It's a social housing firm of the city of the metropolis of Bordeaux. So in the city, it's really prominent because the city is very low, but it's part of a large modern development of the 60s of 4,000 dwellings. So one of the blocks is this one. And it's very clear that we should never stay outside and look at these buildings like this. What is important is to go inside, because inside the reality is really different. You see all this interior space, and the value is inside. And the value has been given by every inhabitant that made the decoration, that has a lot of collections of little objects. It's when we finished the visit, you totally forgot that it's a big slab, and you don't see anymore the image of outside. You have just in mind that we have to do something for these dwellings to improve the quality, to bring what is missing, to repair what is obsolete or broken, because these buildings have 50 years. And it becomes a kind of project, not of renovating 3 blocks, but of changing the space of 530 families and 530 dwellings. So the principle is not to change the structure inside, because we propose to do this transformation in occupied site without removing any family. So we propose to make very little works inside, just interior finishes, renovation, paintings, renovate bathroom, electricity, but no change in the walls, no restructuration inside, but to bring the space missing in adding a space in front of 4 meters, which is a kind of winter garden, and then to open all windows to transform them in a glass door, so that it's possible from every space to get light, to get transparency, but also to give the possibility to go in the winter garden like a small garden on the ground, and that changes radically the situation. So this is a piece of the long slabs. And here again, the free space is given by this extension that is made systematically for all the dwellings at all the levels. So we did also, because it was a long process, also to inform inhabitants. It's public social housing, so it's important that all inhabitants should be informed, because also at the end they have to vote for or against the project. So we did this show flat, and this show flat became also the place of the project, with meetings, with also informations given there all along the process. And also that was this guide which was made for every inhabitant to explain the process, to explain also all the different schedules, and also give all informations of contacts that inhabitants should need during the construction, but also explain in detail. This is just one extract, but in detail all the process. And then we started the construction with these extensions by prefabricated modules, and all this change situation from this facade to this one. But again, it's not just a process of changing the facade, it's a process of extending the living space. So from the beginning of the design, we also proposed the methodology of works, because it should be easy and not disturbing too much for the inhabitants. And then the process of construction started with preliminary foundations for the extension, which are supported by this foundation and not supported by the existing slabs, the existing buildings. The modules arriving on a track, placed in front of the block, then the columns for the next modules, and again and again. And what we had a sufficient number of levels built, then we were allowed to change the facade, and this change should be done in 2 days to keep acceptable by the inhabitants. So the first day, that was the cut of the handrails. The second day, the new glass facade, and a few weeks or not many weeks, but sometime later, the inhabitants could open and use the space. So before we had the situation from outside, then we placed for the 2 days of changing the facade this internal partition with the windows to keep possible the life inside. The process of cutting the handrails, and then the new windows, and the change in the relation between inside and outside or semi-outside, which is a winter garden plus the balcony. So all this system of winter garden, to return to the built with climate, is also very important in the comfort and also in the energy saving for the building, because just the winter garden has the same efficiencies than just an insulation placed on the facade, and it's based on these 4 layers of interior glass windows, external facade for the winter garden, and two curtains, one thermal curtain and one solar curtain behind the winter garden. And the change in the interior space is always kept, and the change is in the relation between inside, outside, and this new space that has been appropriated very fast by all inhabitants. And the change of the building itself, which is radical. We took also the opportunity of the flat roofs to introduce a new kind of houses, larger typologies, which are not existing in the building, with light constructions, not to have to reinforce structures. And here it creates absolutely amazing situations of houses with greenhouses, but also interior space. And all of this is the same rent as it was before, because the rent has a bit increased, but the energy charges for maintenance has been reduced. So in total, for the tenant, it's the same cost per month. So build or do not build? You?
Yes, build or not, do not build. This project, it was commissioned by the municipality of Bordeaux. It was called embellishment of some places in Bordeaux, not the main places, but some places at the periphery. This one was called the Place aux Coqs, and we don't knew it. We went there. The first ideas, the first feelings were that place was nice. We asked already the municipality, do you think there is a need of embellishment? Yes. And the mayor has to make an event in 6 months for with the new plaza. So we work more. We come back to the plaza. We make some interview of the inhabitants. We look at the plaza at different moments in the day or when it was raining at different moments. And finally, we came back to the municipality 6 months or 6 months later, and we say, this is our project. Our project is to do nothing. Just take attention to the plaza. Go there, look at it precisely, and try to feel the charm of the plaza. Take care, clean the plaza, this little plaza, as often as the other main plaza of the city. And the project was done like that. It is to build or to build almost not. It was the case for the Palais de Tokyo. Palais de Tokyo was built in the 30s for the Contemporary Art Museum until the Centre Pompidou was built. It was an art center with of this kind, and after different uses of functions, when the Centre Pompidou was built and the collections were gone away, it was used for cinema, for photography, for different events, and finally there was a big project that was imagined, and it takes a very long time for the project, and after that they start the works inside, and they start the demolitions to cut the beams, to cut the columns, to change a lot of things inside during 2 years, and after 2 years the project was too complex, too difficult, the institutions were not agree altogether. The Ministry of Culture decided to stop the project. And then the building stays empty during 3-4 years, and 30,000 square meters of space in the middle of Paris. And we find it like that. And the first commission was to say, can you make 10,000 square meters inside? And we have 3 million euros. So it was actually nearly nothing. And 10 years after, we had to complete with 15,000 square meters more to complete the whole building. So it's to take that situation and to say, it's a fantastic space, even if it has already been demolished in many points. So we just have to repair, to do the minimum that it is necessary for some publics, for some artists to come back and to be able to make some art pieces and for the spectators to look at them. So we take the space like that and we try to keep this atmosphere and this system, just bringing the minimum, some lights, some heating, all the security that was needed, and to leave the artist and the public going inside. And now, since 15 years, it is a totally successful place where with nearly no money, it was possible to recreate a very important place for art in the heart of Paris. So many events, so many exhibitions happen, totally different, like bringing 20,000 of all the tires in the, in the building and making a kind of enormous relief inside. Here, the free space, it is nearly all the space, because what we really intend, it is how it is possible for the spectators to be able to go everywhere in the space. Do not build and build double. It was a problem for this project in Dunkirk, in the north of France, with this building alone in the landscape. It was a former harbor of Dunkirk. It was very dynamic at the moment, and after some years, the activity stopped, and this building was the only one that was kept. It was called the cathedral by the workers because it was a very huge building that was 25 meters large, 80 meters long, 30 meters high, and it was used to repair some big parts of the boats. It was very important for all the workers in Dunkirk, and we find this space inside. And because it was also, the activity has stopped, the project here again was to install an art center in the place. So it means to make a program and a competition in order to place inside this void 4 or 5 levels of 2,000 square meters each to fill the void, and in this place to organize some exhibition rooms, some administration places, some storage for the artworks, some facilities for the spectators. And when we see this space, immediately we imagine that it was not possible to lose this void. So immediately we start to think about another possibility, and instead to work inside, what we propose it is to create the double, a kind of twin form, a twin building, in which we would place the program that was asked for the competition of these art spaces, and to keep the void. So it means that this was the existing, the HAL AP2 existing. What we do it is to make exactly the same building with a different envelope, with exactly the same dimension, and to place the program inside in order to avoid to place it in the existing space. So here, the free space, the blue space, it becomes the existing space. And this was the result. It was much more easier to build on the other side than inside, because inside the floor was very, very solid and thick. It was complex to make some foundation. On the side, it was sand. It was much more easy. And in fact, it was cheaper to make it like that. And at the end, we have the capacity, we have the possibility to use the new one and the old one that create a strange and interesting relations between the two spaces. So in the new one, we find all the program with the exhibition rooms, the space on top to see the landscape, the space between the two volumes, and precisely from the new one, the possibility to look in the old one. It means to build with, to build double, and to keep the voids when the voids are so exciting and so interesting. The last project that we want to show, it is linked with perhaps urban planning and urbanism, and it is about the questions where and how to build. And in fact, it was a commission 10 years ago that we worked with Frédéric Druot and Christophe Hutin. It was for Bordeaux in the southwest of France. And the question was for this community of suburbs and city of Bordeaux and around, that is around 1 million inhabitants, how it is possible to imagine in the next 10 years the possibility to build 50,000 new dwellings, affordable dwellings, in new spaces, in new areas, and in relations with the transport system. So this was our proposition. It means 50,000 new dwellings. It is also 55,000 hectares of existing nature. The official nature, but even more the real nature, the nature of the gardens, the nature of some grasses that is growing on the streets, etc. 50,000 new dwellings, 55,000 hectares of well-serviced lands. Already streets, roads, networks of water, energy that are already there and that we don't have to build more. 50,000 new dwellings, it means also 160,000 existing collective housing, 80,000 existing single housing, all existing at different places in the city or around the city. 50,000 new dwellings, it means hundreds of capable situations. Territory is wide, friendly, the nature is easily accessible, enough thick or clear, simulate or hidden, contrast and various, enough irrigated, drained, furrowed, crossed, served, powered, organized, enough capable to generate inside its existing organizations, in connection with its systems, its roads, with no new master plans and schemes of impulsive and visionary urbanists, neither formatting nor toolbox, without the necessity to cut or demolish, without having to break up, dismantle and reset, without disturbing, transform weakest and less appreciated existing houses, and in the same time, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 new dwellings, large, luminous, generous, and lasting. Spend less to do more. Never demolish. Demolition on that side, the Tourbois Le Pret on the right. Transformation. Save cost of workings. Between demolition and transformation, 62% less of cost of working. Save energies. Between demolition and transformation, 74% less. Save cost of public facilities, 56% less. Create new housing and services. Instead to lose 100, you have 120. Reduce heating and maintenance loads, 60% less. Never cut trees. Give air and fluidity. Give space and luminosity. thanks to an accurate urbanism, carefully, case by case, with a special care for organizations, differences, people, trees, and bugs. With the precision of urban economy, one's feet on the ground from each dwelling and each garden. Liberate the urban rights and use, keep in good repair. Two similar situations, without care and with care. Be careful to the special qualities and their abilities. A garage in Mérignac, apartment blocks in Detroit by Ms. Van der Rohe. Make easier the private initiative. Grants the management of public areas to the private initiative. Open the view, boost the pleasure of dwelling. Simply, from the inside of living areas with delicacy, existing ground floor apartment. Take off window sill, open on the garden. Offer the use of the garden. Contribute to the public areas between the private gardens. Existing collective, social, or private dwelling. Metamorphosis of an existing dwelling, more space, more light, more fluidity, less energy consuming. By generous additions or winter gardens and balconies. For every dwelling, for every families. On the same serviced land, create new dwellings without consuming new territories. Disused facilities divided in private lots. Purchase large surfaces not yet untapped, serviced to live and work differently. Little by little, take over the dimensions, metamorphosing them, looking for wonderful. Offer a variety of ways to live, ways to rent, ways to acquire some property. Enjoy outstanding geography. Enjoy the freedom use like in a villa. Enjoy fluent and generous areas. Enjoy a large and true garden. Enjoy the outstanding view from the rooftops. Enjoy canopies without sacrificing them. Enjoy the charm of small housing, large, private, intimate spaces. Enjoy oversized spaces. Extend, add, back on, mix, optimize, superimpose, do or not to do. Apartment blocks in bassins, 134 existing dwellings. Apartment blocks in bassins, 134 existing dwellings, enlarged, insulated, plus 66 new dwellings. Apartment blocks in Mérignac, 272 existing dwellings. Apartment block in Mérignac, 272 existing dwellings, enlarged, insulated, plus 123 new dwellings. Urban context in Florac, view on the small wood, 346 existing dwellings, 3,600 square meters of shops, 628 parking places. Urban context in Florac, view on the small wood, 346 existing dwellings, enlarged, insulated, plus 236 new dwellings possible, 3,600 square meters of shops, plus 500 square meters of new areas, 628 parking places, plus 210 additional places. Apartment block in Ambarès and Lagrave, 79 existing dwellings. Apartment block in Ambarès and Lagrave, 79 existing dwellings, enlarged, insulated, plus 69 new dwellings transformed. Perhaps the last...
So the last words to inhabitants. So just to say that the transformation of existing housing is a fantastic opportunity. It makes it possible to be more generous, to give more space to each inhabitant, to produce good and affordable living conditions, no longer determined by the economic, regulatory, or normative minimum, but by maximum generosity and sustainability. It means to do more with less. And the last word for this inhabitant of... should I do something, or does it go alone? I didn't see the mouse, the pointer. Ah, yeah.
Je croyais que je rêvais, que c'était une chose qu'ils avaient fait pour faire du cinéma. J'ai pensé ça pendant longtemps. Mais pour l'expliquer, le dire ce que c'est, je ne peux pas. Mais c'est dans ma tête qui se passe. On ne s'entend pas que ça finisse comme ça. Je vois comme ça, je vois une énorme chose très bien faite. C'est mes yeux, voilà, finalement. C'est avec ça que je vis maintenant. Parce qu'avant, on était ici enfermés. On ne sortait pas, on était là, il y avait des petites fenêtres, tu voyais rien du tout, quoi. Dans les jardins d'hiver, je fais beaucoup de choses. Je me promène, je sors dehors, je regarde les gens qui travaillent à l'extérieur. J'arrose mes plantes, tout, quoi, et je fais la vie. Moi, je vis avec mon copain, le temps. Vous connaissez le temps? Je suis à l'ascenseur, je trouve des gens, et je le vois, il fait chaud, il fait froid, il va faire mauvais. Et c'est toujours mon compagnon de route. Il ne me suit pas trop. Et puis après, ça continue, et je parle de mon balcon. Je préfère le balcon que l'appartement. C'est normal. C'est une autre vie. Là, je suis dehors, je sors à l'autre balcon, le petit, je suis dehors à l'extérieur, je vois tout le monde, je regarde les gens, c'est comme si je suis dehors, à la rue.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. As Robin mentioned, I'm Catherine Lassen. This is Hannes Frickhorn. And it's been our great pleasure to work with Anne and Jean-Philippe over the last 3 years on the Rothwell Program that many of you have seen pieces of to date. We had the Rothwell Symposium in 2021. We have an exhibition that will open tomorrow night. Hannes has been part of this ambitious research program. So there's all these different components that we're bringing together in this exhibition, connecting different parts also of the school. We're both from the architecture discipline in the School of Architecture, Design and Planning at the University of Sydney. Anyway, so it's just a great pleasure, and thank you, and Jean-Philippe, for showing us your wonderful buildings. And for working with us so generously during this period. We thought tonight we could briefly have a little bit of a discussion, spell out some of these themes a little bit further, and then also open up to the audience for questions a little bit later. So maybe if I could start, and then Hannes and I will alternate in questions. Hopefully it's not too awkward. One thing I wanted to maybe talk about a little bit, because we've worked with the students over 3 years and explored many different aspects of your, I think, very clear body of work. But there's so much more that one starts to see the more closely one looks at the projects. And I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit more about your conception of freedom, because with the students, say in Nantes, we talked about the School of Architecture, but in relationship to the Le Corbusier Resi, unité block that we could see from the roof of the Nantes School of Architecture, and we have the ramp. And, Le Corbusier famously spoke about the free plan. And then, say, an architect like Graham Kohlhaas, who we also spoke about a little bit with respect to the School of Architecture in Nantes. Kohlhaas famously foregrounded the free section in his book, Delirious New York. It's sort of some sort of manifesto on Manhattan. So I wondered, because I think you've given this matter a lot of thought, to say a little bit more about your conception of freedom, say in relationship to these other senses of freedom, say Corbusier's free plan or Kohlhaas's free section. Is that okay?
I think for us it's clear that I think it's about the constraints. In fact, we don't want that the architecture should be a constraint in the life of people. Of course, we need to build the continent, to build something. But what is important is when the people feel free themselves in architecture and not feel constrained by the architecture itself, feel constrained to do this here, or this here, but have this kind of possibility of appropriation, of changing the way of living, of why not finally put the bedroom in a bed in the winter garden, and it happens rather often in good season. So it's in fact we like when we finish a project that it's not really finished, but that the users, the inhabitant, can continue something. So it's always for us an effort when we are designing a project to think where to stop designing, to let the place to the next. So it's probably the freedom is there. Is what kind of opportunity the architecture should give to the occupants.
No, it's about I think to build it is to use some materials that are the air, the light, the space, the mobility of people, and the capacity to use these elements to allow the life and the movement to happen. So I think it's important because actually, normally we should not have to pay for the air, we should not have to pay for the light, we should not have to pay for the space. And I think it's these materials that are important. And it is with these materials that I think the freedom is possible to happen. Yeah.
I think one thing that has been a fascinating dimension of working together with you and with the students over these years been to encounter many of the architectural precedents and the architectural work that has inspired you, that has shaped you. And we saw a lot of it in France, and we discussed also many times the Oco House by Fraiot, for example, or Chacon de Latte, this early work that you were also engaged with very much. Perhaps we could say something more about the projects we saw in France and why it's relevant or important to take students to work like, for example, Ivry Suzanne by René Gaustin, the public housing.
Yes, it was interesting when we met the students from Australia and we have visited the different spaces. It was so different than to see Hans-Walter Müller, and I invite all people to go to the exhibition tomorrow because we will see some films about it. And there was also, for example, this space in Ivry-sur-Seine, which is a very, very close suburb of Paris, and that explained that 50 years ago, there was a real generosity in thinking of affordable housing and inventing some extraordinary spaces that were done 50 years ago and that answer precisely to all the topics we are talking about today. It means how the city can be affordable, how we can have mixity, how we can have density, how is it possible to have nature in the same time as density, how it is possible for each flat to have a garden or a terrace, etc. And all of this, it is realized, it is done. It is done by this architect. And it's incredible that this lesson is not taken in account. And it was fantastic to go in Ivry-sur-Seine to see the work of René Gailloustet, of Jean Renaudy, and to see that you have some towers, but under these towers you have a kind of huge mountain, that it was a mountain in which you can live inside because it was done by gardens, terraces, flats on 1 or 2 levels. So each room had a little garden in front of it, etc. And this was absolutely extraordinary. A quality of space that was in the same time affordable, that it was so generous that in fact everyone could have the wish to go there and to live there. It could be some people that have not much money and people that have more money, and precisely we see that even today there are still these people living together in a very, very good way. Unfortunately, I think it was 6 months ago, René Gailloustet, the architect, she was an old lady, 80 years old, and she died in the apartment, in the place where she has made this project. And we went to see the place with the students some months after, and there was a huge poster that was perhaps 20 meters long, and the inhabitants write, "Thank you, René," because they wanted to thank her, because this architect proposed them incredible spaces for living, affordable, with mixity, with nature, with gardens, etc. And this is beautiful. We should consider this example because they exist, and today we have all the technology, all the possibilities to do such buildings that are extremely dense, that create really the heart and the center of a city, and in the same time that offer this kind of possibilities.
It's also amazing to see that it has created a community, because we met all the women living there since the very beginning, but also the daughter of this woman, and it's not just one isolated case, who also do everything to rent also a space here. Because inside also this is not only housing, there are schools, there are shops. But what we see, and it's a pity that we were explained that, for example, the shopping mall, step by step, the city is closing the shops and doing nothing with it, and the place is in a way losing the utility and also the capacity, and the inhabitants, they try to struggle against this, but finally they are very weak now, and so it's very important to learn a lot about this, and of course not to reproduce to reproduce what is good, but try to avoid the mistakes and the problem.
Yeah, and so the students that studied these projects did these very nice documentations of particularly those 2 projects, the inflatable structures by Hans Walter Müller and René Gailloustet, particularly her apartment, which is very beautiful in this really rather massive housing complex in Paris. So everyone will be able to see those examples that were documented by the students. But I think one of the things that struck me too is this sense of incredible generosity and kind of a magical possibility in this rather constrained, in this constrained building type, that you would have such extraordinary freedom that I think you also see in your apartments in Bordeaux. But I think too that the idea of generosity, I think you show incredible generosity in terms of the way you engage with our students. Like, I think some of them had kind of transformative experiences in France with you. Do you think it's important for architects to teach? And if so, well, or not, but then in what ways do your approaches to the way you develop your projects connect with the way you teach? Because to me it seems very consistent.
It's important for teachers to learn from the students.
Now, what is important is to keep always the link and the contact with new generations, and I make a bracket to return to the trip in France, and also the 2 other workshops that we did here with the students. And what was very important, and probably the most important at the beginning, is probably not more the subjects on which we have worked together, but much more the principle of how to approach places and how to learn to look at places. Because it's very clear that probably we don't look at enough to what we have. We don't analyze, we don't observe enough. Or when we observe what we have, very often it to start by the long list of problems, by the long list of mistakes. And for us, it's not the good way to do it. The first is to look for the beauty. And this is what we try to do with the students here, as we do in our teaching. First, without any preconceived idea, we should look at things with a very open eyes, with very fresh eyes, and look what we have and see where is the beauty that probably is not at where we expect it.
I think this is the main point. I think we see nothing when we cross the city. When we see this project in Bordeaux, this big slab that was painted in white, yellow, and brown, because it seemed that it could be the life could be better if it was painted like that. In fact, we see nothing. We see nothing because we stay all the time at 200 meters, 300 meters. What is it? It is a big rectangle in the city. We see nothing because we never go inside. We never talk with people. We never go in the living rooms. We never see Madame Ramos that is preparing some cafe and some little cakes, etc. We never go and to see Mr. Martinez that has started to collect some little bonsai and that plays them. We never see that. And this is the intensity of what we need to see. And with all this information, with all this richness, we should see the city totally differently. And we should start to improve and to repair and to make the city better from that richness. And not to stay in our office looking at the map where the slab of 150 meters long is 10 centimeters on your paper. And where you start to make some drawings. We have to go on the site to look at situations, to understand them, and to stop to have these visions from very far away that doesn't, perhaps was, I don't think it has never been a good solution. I think it's what is important, precisely when we are talking about the transformation of the city, it is necessary to be extremely precise and to go in the different points. And it is what we have done with the students when we work for serious building and when we work on Waterloo, and we went to see the places, and the students had made a lot of photography, and they work with this photography, they talk with people, they look at the gardens, they take interest in the flowers, in the trees, in everything, because everything is rich, everything is interesting, and to transform and to improve the city, it is to take all this benefit of the existing and to see what is missing. Is there a problem here? Can we repair something? Show that this is beautiful. Show to the other people, look how much it is interesting. And it is this that we have to continue to do in order to make the city better. The city is not good. It's difficult. We see homeless. We see difficult situations. City is a place where people survive, but in the same time, it is difficult to live in the city. So actually, the job for architects, for urbanists, It is to repair and to make it better with a lot of kindness, delicately, without disturbing, without demolishing, and with precision. And the precision is absolutely necessary. And the observation, to look precisely at things, it is the starting point.
And all of this is not conservative. It doesn't oppose to the necessity of evolution, but it's to think the evolution as an addition, as an overlapping, and not as a replacement.
We have a lot more questions, but I'm just conscious of the time, and I know we said we would open up for questions. So if anybody in the audience wanted to, had a question they wanted to ask? Do we have, I think there was a roving mic. And maybe Peter John?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne and Jean-Philippe. Your lecture fills me, and I'm sure many people here, with hope and joy for the future, a future where we can do less to harm our planet and achieve more. So it was a beautiful lecture. Thank you very much. There was one slide that fascinated me, and I was wondering if you could tell us more, which was in Bordeaux, where the woman was behind the temporary shielding for the construction work, looking a little bit scared, I have to say. And then the next slide with the huge cutting blade that was going to cut her walls and so forth. And I wanted to tie that with the end of your lecture, where there was the fantastic film of the woman walking around talking about her new flat. And could you talk more about the people in your project in Bordeaux, about what they felt about staying in their house rather than being moved out, and what they felt about staying there during the construction, and how that was, particularly if you had some quotes from those people, or if you've met them, or some stories from those people I would love to hear.
Yeah.
We have worked precisely on 3 situations, one in Paris, one in Saint-Nazaire, and one in Bordeaux. The one in Paris and the one in Bordeaux, the inhabitants stay inside. In Saint-Nazaire, it was not occupied totally, so it was half occupied, so the client, social houser, he decided to say to the people, you can go somewhere else and you will come back when the works will be finished. So the building becomes empty. There was 2 fires. It was squatted. Nobody was taking care anymore of the building, and we finally
twice long.
Yeah, and it took twice long. So finally, we think that to keep the people inside, it is a better solution, and we have to take this in account. So we say, it is possible to disturb less as possible to the people, and to explain them that they will be disturbed, but minimum. It's also important because in this building you have very often old family or woman alone that is there for a long time. When you explain that you will transform, the main point is that she doesn't want to quit her bedroom, her bathroom, her living room. So no, I want to stay here. So then we have to explain that the works will take one day, or perhaps one day will be difficult. And the photo that you have seen, because there was some asbestos in the windows, so we have to protect the worker on one side and the inhabitant on the other side during the works. So this box, it stays one day. And we explained that. And one day after, we had the possibility to take it away. But for this inhabitant, what was important, it is to be able to sleep in her bedroom during the night, to go to her bathroom in the morning, and to stay there. And it was amazing. The lady that you see in the film, Madame Ramos, she was preparing the cafe for the workers. So you had the people coming to her place, and there was a queue sometimes because she was preparing them. And this was absolutely amazing. And some months, some years later, it was strange. The building was finished, and we talked with her, and she was talking about one man, one worker. He was controlling the project, and we don't find him very sympathetic. And she said, Mr. I don't remember his name. Yes, he's very nice. Still, the project is finished. He's coming every Saturday. He brings me to see my daughter. She's living 100 kilometers further, and he brings me back. So it is incredible, this kind of relations that happen. And a lot of people, when the project was finished, they say, it's good because it's finished. But it is sad because we don't see the workers anymore.
Yeah. They complain at the same time, but at the same time they are happy. But we have to say that it requires an important organization to make it as I don't know if nice is the word, but is as well as possible. So this organization is first in designing the project. We have to think what kind of works could not be done should not be done because it's not possible with people inside. For example, breaking a concrete wall. If you imagine to do that in every apartment, so it's better to forget. So it's important from the very beginning, and also to explain this to the people. And it's important in this kind of process to integrate the inhabitants in the process as also partners, and not just make a short information, because in fact the inhabitants, they have skills. And we learn that when we think that the inhabitants, they don't know everything, but they have skills. They know a lot of things, and they are able to talk about their skills. So we have to integrate them. And in fact, we had this organization also of 2 or 3 or 4 persons in permanence. One person from the owner who knows, like, for example, the keeper, the housekeeper, who knows the people very well, who know every family, who is able to knock at the door, and they always open the door. One person from the contractor, and one person from the architect team. So, and these 3 persons, every day, they are dedicated to inhabitants. They don't do anything else than moving here and there to inform that the electrician will come, to inform that there will be noise here and there, to help to move furniture when it's necessary. So all these kind of things which are absolutely essential to make this happen in a good way. And in that condition, for example, that project, the construction works lasted 16 months. And 16 months, it doesn't mean 16 for everybody. It was something around 3 months per staircase. So, but it's important also to think also to a different process of design, of bidding process, and all of this.
It is also important economically. When you have a building to transform and to change, if we start to think that all these families that are inside, we have to find for them some new locations during 1 year or 2 years, etc., to bring their furniture to another place and then to bring back their furniture it costs a lot. It's very often people don't want to do it, and sometimes they don't think that they will come back to the place. So at the end, if we can manage this question to leave the people living inside the block, it is much more easy.
Yeah. So it's why also the mock-up 1-to-1 was very important, because many many inhabitants in the meetings, they were looking at the renderings, so they found that very well, and they came to visit in Paris the tower that we already did, and they discussed with the other inhabitants. But some of them, they had problems to touch the reality. So this mock-up helps a lot to show also in detail the transformation. What does it mean renovating the electricity, the bathroom, how long it is, how do we do? And most of them, they were coming and they say, oh, it's fantastic, but it's not for us. And saying, yes, it's for you. And this place, it's very important to create also this condition of including also everybody in the process. And also to have a very strong rigor in the construction. So it's why even the contractor, he changes the teams every 3 months, because he said otherwise they will be too familiar, not with people, but with the task, and they will lose attention. And it requires a lot of attention when you bring this kind of concrete module of 3 to 4 tons in front of a facade. So the man with the crane should be very, very clever. And so all of this, it's a process that must be defined and controlled from the very beginning.
Well, thank you. I'm really sorry because I've been told that we have to wrap up. We're way over time. I think it's fascinating to talk to you, and I'm hopeful that these conversations can actually continue tomorrow night, because you have the exhibition opening in the tin sheds tomorrow night, and all these projects are available. You can see them, and then also you can see the films,
and
some of which, and the students' work. So I'd like everyone to thank Anne and Jean-Philippe, and thank you.
Of the University of Sydney, Belinda Hutchison, to draw this evening's proceedings to a close. Thank you, Belinda.
Thanks, Robin. And I'll only take just 2 minutes, but I think it's really important to have a really big thank you to Anne and Jean-Philippe. What an extraordinarily inspiring evening it's been tonight. It's just fabulous. And every time I get together with them, I get really excited because I learn something. And I just have to say that's the most unpresuming title for a presentation, Free Space. It should have been Urban Metamorphosis. Absolutely should have been that, because the way you talked about free space, the way you talked about double space, the way you talked about winter gardens, but really they're summer gardens, they're all year-round gardens, the way you talked about the use of light, the way you talked about using the environment in so much more productive manner to make the lives of the people in the communities that you work with so much better. It was just extraordinary, and I just found it incredibly exciting. And we're very, very grateful for you coming tonight and being with us. And also thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Hannes. It was fantastic to have the time to be able to do the interview afterwards. But there's 2 people I have to really thank here tonight, and that is Gary and Susan Rothwell. They are inspiring, they are wonderful, they are generous, they're successful alumni of our university, and they gave us an enormous challenge, a really ambitious challenge with this Rothwell Chair program. And to be here tonight and to having lived through the last 3 years, I've got to say, you gave us a vision of how do we really get innovation in architecture and urbanism to create better environments to really improve the quality of life of people. And how do we really give impact to our students and give them a really unique opportunity? Well, I think you've absolutely delivered in spades. We've had the symposium, we've had the workshops, we've been at Green Square, we've had some of our students have the most extraordinary experiences going to Paris, to be with Jean-Philippe, to be with Anne. I just have to quote one of our students who came back and said, it was Lauren Lee, who said, one of our master's students who went to Paris said, "This was the most unforgettable and magical experience of my life." And what will that mean for her and her cohort of students in terms of the future? We know their futures will be great. We know they'll go on to be leaders in architecture and urban design and make a real difference to the environment of the people that they're working with. That is the absolute joy of having a program like this. an absolute joy. But it's the research that our academic staff are able to do with Jean-Philippe and with Anne to get ideas. And the lovely thing in terms of talking to Jean-Philippe and Anne last night was that they got something out of it too. Jean-Philippe said one of the things that was just so inspiring for him was to be able to talk to the students, because the students challenged him and the way he thinks. And I have to say there's one more takeout for us, which I think is really exciting. We had a building and estates committee meeting for our university just this week, and we were talking about a really, really ugly, difficult building which we've been using on a run-to-fail basis, because really we thought there was nothing more we could do. But I think you've been an inspiration to us, because we've decided we will not demolish that building. We will not pull it down. The exciting thing about that building is that we are going to refurb that whole building. We are going to, first of all, save money, which is a great thing. It's going to take much less time to redevelop that building. We're going to be able to put another, I think it's something like 300 researchers into that building with much better wet lab space, with much better facilities, with much better core research equipment. That's what creative design thinking is all about. And it's so much better for our environment. So I just want to say thank you, because I think you've really helped us think differently about how we approach our own building projects. And we can all think about that. And that's what I think is really exciting. And when I think about our university, we think about looking at complex problem solving and thinking about how do we do things differently. That's what we want to teach our students. That's how we want to do our research. And that's how I think we can really deliver on what we call leadership for good. So thank you, Jean-Philippe. Thank you, Anne. I have a small gift to give you, because this is sadly the end of your 3 years here. We do hope you'll come back to Australia and visit us. I think I have a small gift for you both. A small gift. I think it's a very big gift. Oh, no, this is another gift. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much. And I think we have a small gift also for Jean-Philippe and for Gary and Susan. That is just a small token of our appreciation for everything you've done for us. It's just been fantastic. So thank you all, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I think it's been a great evening.